Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours. As always, this is where we answer all your questions about media and production 24/7. If you're watching on YouTube, you can enter your questions by using this QR code or simply going to askofficehours.global. It is Friday here in the Western Hemisphere, so we're talking infrastructure. And today we're going to be taking a deeper dive into VPNs, the virtual private networks that we all use to help manage some aspects of our live broadcasts here and in other circumstances. That's coming in our second hour, but right now it's time for your questions. So let's dive in. Alexander, what do our viewers and listeners have on their minds today?
First one this morning comes from the QR code. This is Angelo Jack in Brooklyn, New York. Hello, Office Hours. Needing to acquire a DI box as part of an audio rig at a college. Can Office Hours offer any recommendations for a high-quality unit?
Absolutely, and that comes off the QR code. And this is John Wallace helping you out. John?
Yeah, I think the best DIs I've used on the road are radial. The Avalon U5 is my all-time favorite DI, but probably a little extreme for most use cases in a college. But anything from radial should be able to solve your need.
Excellent. Alexander, you wanted to get in?
Yeah, 100% I'll back that radial recommendation. They're always my go-to. They make very high-quality stuff built in Canada, and never had a problem with radial boxes. At the higher end level, I do really like the Rupert Neve DI boxes. So if you can afford them, they are fantastic. They make various active single channel. The biggest one they make is an 8-channel 1U rack version, and that thing sonically sounds fantastic.
Nice. And let us go on to our next question.
Next question is from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. Which other companies have requested Zoom release local recording in the manner of Riverside.fm? I'm trying to build a case for this feature with Zoom Dev. PM me on Discord the FR number if you have one. Thank you.
Andy's looking for that. Alex Lindsay's going to help us with that. Alex?
Yeah. I think that the biggest case is that they promised it to Zoomtopias ago. So they promised that they were going to give us double-ended recording, and they didn't. And so so when you announce something, when you go through the trouble of announcing double-ended recording at a conference, I think you need to deliver it. I think that's the number one thing. But we may warm up a little bit and group together and just decide that this is the week that we all request it, because it would make a huge difference in the quality of, our records. And Zoom is the right solution for this. It is. We don't want to teach someone how to use Riverside. And the problem really is if you want to do something live and get that double end recording, Riverside can't do that very well. Squadcast can't do that very well. Zoom is the right one to do it with if they would just do what they said they were going to do. So that's, so it is an incredible solution that people would use all the time. I don't care if they charge a little bit more for that one feature. I think many of us would be glad to pay $5 or $10 a month over top of what we're already paying for just that feature. So I think that it's really unfortunate that they haven't solved that problem.
Time for our next question.
Next one's from Brian Carney in Wheaton, Illinois. Which format will ultimately rule shorts? Long, chapterized? Where do you see attention spans going in the next 3 to 6 years? And that's from the QR code.
Oh, nice question. Nigel, start us off.
Yeah, long and shorts is sort of the opposite of each other. But I think what's become interesting to me in the way that I use YouTube is there's really a role for both. And I often, if I stopped waiting at a car wash yesterday, and I was watching shorts, and I found people were interesting, and I enjoyed it. If I'm sitting at my desk and I want to get through content, I'll watch long-form, multi-hour podcasts like Office Hours if I'm in the right place to consume that. So I think the reality is we're going to find horses for courses going forward, and we're going to have to decide what is the best way to communicate the message we have to communicate, and what is the audience we're trying to communicate it to, and how will they want to most likely receive it. And that, I think, is going to help you decide what your content should look like. But I don't think there's going to be one winner. There may be a more popular way of doing it, but it may be less influential. So you're going to have to balance all of these things up.
Alex Lindsay.
And I think it depends on what scale you're talking about as well, because one of the things that's really hard for someone without a lot of resources is to create the content density that we're used to looking at when we watch a movie. When you're watching a feature film or you're watching a major release, you're talking about $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a finished minute. And that's an incredible amount of resources. That's 10 writers or 12 writers. That's a crew of 100 people shooting it. That is all these editors. And you can say that you can do it without it, but you can't. Like, you can't get the same level of density. And so we're used to watching that level of quality. And so you can hold that amount of that quality for a short period of time if you're an independent producer, but it's very hard to keep it for a long period of time. And I find myself, I watch more YouTube than I watch anything else. So it's solid 70-80% of my viewing. So I prefer YouTube over almost everything else to watch it. So it's not that I don't watch YouTube, but the way I watch it, as Nigel said, is I'm skipping through things very quickly. Like, I just go, I'll see, you'll give me a 20-minute thing, and I'll go, I start moving through it. I look for the ridges. I just look for, like, where are the hot ridges here to look at if you're speaking to, but you have, like, seconds before I'll start doing that, and I'll start moving through it. If you're long and you're talking and I don't think there's any music, I'll speed you up to 1.8, X. Typically, I will do a bunch of things, and that's part of why I like watching YouTube. But I think that is the challenge for a lot of independent creators. I find I don't do that. I don't speed up traditional TV, partially because those tools aren't as easily available, but also because there's so much packed into it. It's very hard to speed it up because the content density is so much higher. It's hard to watch it quickly. And so it's just a different behavior that you end up having because there's more content density there. And I'm searching for that content density. So I think that shorts are really good because you can hold the content density. You can have lots of little verticals that you're serving, and it's just a little morsel of something that you can move on to. I think the chapterized works well when it makes sense. I think what you're seeing in Hollywood is a lot of people moving towards series because it's better from a subscription perspective. It's better on almost every level than a feature film. The feature film was packaged because it had to go out in theatrical release. But when you stop doing that, which is where most of this is going, theatrical releases are probably not going to last another more than 5 or 10 years. We're not going to be doing that anymore. And so as we dissipate from that, the creator makes more money and gets to tell a bigger story with 6 episodes. They're getting a 6-hour feature or a 4.5 or 8-hour feature. So the creator gets to tell a bigger story. The subscription service gets to keep people there longer. The actors have more work. There's all these things that are better for almost everybody to do a series, and then a feature film. And so I think I think you're going to see more and more of that. I think what you will see is probably less and less of these things that we used to call features that were an hour and a half to 2.5 or 3 hours long. They just don't fit into the future.
John Wallace.
Yeah, I don't think there's like anything that's going to ultimately rule out for content. Really, Nigel hit the nail on the head. Where I'm consuming content is the type of content I'm gonna sit with. And then you also have to think about shorts is really where discoveries happen to get people to listen to your long form podcast, then to move into potentially chapterized content as those creators start advancing throughout their career and creating more and more rich and depth of content. It's really flowing that way. It's really interesting to see. YouTube, Twitch, even Kick, their discovery is none. Like, people are having to use TikTok and YouTube Shorts now, which is getting better, to really have that discovery, to kind of have that pop-off moment, to then step into that next thing of getting people to actually engage on the platforms where you can monetize and make real money. TikTok's not that platform. YouTube Shorts really is not there yet. But hopefully moving in the right direction, as YouTube is really one of the best places for a content creator to make money.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I was shocked recently to watch a video on Colin Shamir's channel where they discussed this, where the dollars are going from the ad spend, and they were talking about how they are seeing a lot more budget that can get allocated to shorts and a lot more eyeballs and viewing, and they're measuring all this. And so they're asking content creators, where do you see yourself going in the future? And I agree, it's a mix where you want some discovery, so you want some shorts. But if you want to make an hour and a half long video, like I'm seeing some of these guys, we discussed yesterday, some of our favorite podcasts, and Chris Williamson, he just bumps out these 1.5 hour long episodes, and I'll tune into them. But it's where is that viewer at? Where are they going to consume that content? And then how are they going to pay for the resources that they need? So in the Colin Shamir's video, I'll put a link to it. They talk about this channel that asked their viewers to help pitch in to fund their new studio, and the viewers just turned on them, like completely freaked out. So it's an interesting video to watch if you're truly interested in this. It'll blow your mind as to where the big guys, because we're taking away money from what used to be ABC, CBS, and we're putting it across YouTube, TikTok. So that ad spend's got to go somewhere, Facebook, Instagram, and we're just seeing they're voting. The advertisers are voting with their dollars, and the dollars are going into the content creators' hands. So they're going to create content where they need to make money. So hopefully they can mix it up, so they can mix up their creativity and spread their message and do what they want to do, but they also can make enough to pay their staff and have editors, because some of these guys have like 20 editors. It's crazy that they're really acting like a big studio. So it's interesting.
Alex, you want to get back in?
Yeah, I think that, the advertising is pretty lucrative when you get to a certain level of following. I think that usually, when you're getting into the 1, 2, 3 million followers, the advertising revenue starts to turn into a business. I think that when you're below that, a lot of the folks that are making money are doing things where they're selling things. They're selling some kind of service, or selling Patreon, for people to put money into a membership. They're selling something outside of advertising to make that happen. When you talk to a lot of creators, what they'll talk about is like, shorts are really good for discovery. They're good for you to know that you're there, for people to know that you're there. And you'll see us doing that more on our end as well. They're good to let you know. They're not going to drive subscription, and they're not going to drive, a lot of activations. Where live, which is what we do every day, deepens your connection with your core audience. And that's what it does. That's mostly what we do. And then finally, VODs, like building hand-built videos that are 2 or 3 minutes long, that tends to build subscriptions. That tends to be, and you've seen us experiment with a little bit. You'll see us do more of that. But those are the things that happen. And then with these long form, as Guy was talking about, there is no pressure on MacBreak, for instance, or on any of the twit to go short. People complain if we get complaints if it's under an hour and a half. Like it's, because again, as Guy said, it depends on how it's being, and as everyone said here, John and Nigel, it depends on how you're consuming it. Like if you're listening to it in the car and you're working, you want it to just keep going, and keep having the discussion that you're interested in. So it depends on the format. You really have to be careful of what format are you doing this in, and what does the viewer expect to do while they're watching it? Are they going to sit there and watch it completely raptured, or are they going to be putting it in the background and listening to it while they go?
It is such an interesting time to be here. I remember we did the thing on Final Cut that is up on our site, and when it got chapterized, I suddenly realized the next time I went to it that it forms both things, and it changed the way I'm going to structure my programming from now on when I write things or create content. The fact that somebody could jump into a nugget of information out of a long form, algorithmically together, here's the whole look at things, but I'm able now to think about, this is a moment that I need to pull out and make a short so that somebody can find it there, but then go left or right of it and extend their understanding by the fact that it has a longer narrative inside the short bit. That's an interesting concept for me. I think a lot to be happening here. Let's go to the next question.
Next question's from Alex 40 Golner in London. What could have prevented Apple explaining the workflows required to make Apple Vision Pro 3D memory videos and 3D immersive experience videos back in June 2023?
Jason, start us off. Jason Bates.
Well, I don't think they actually needed to, because although it was the first announced 3D camera, the iPhone 15 came out later that year and was, the first released 3D camera. So I think they wanted to be able to not have everything exactly locked down, because 9 months prior, they probably didn't. So it could have been the IP. It could have been any number of things. But my guess is because they didn't have to. All they had to do was say it was coming, and people would just go nuts.
Alex.
I think it's because it's not cooked yet. I think Apple's still figuring it out. And so I think that having people have the headsets, we're experimenting. I don't know if you've seen any of my experiments, but I'm with Stream Voodoo, I'm able to now stream. We're testing it right now. I posted some stuff on Twitter and LinkedIn. We're testing streaming from the phone directly to the headset. Now, that is stuff that's been available for a long time. It's just that it's not, as you said, not super well documented. And Stream Voodoo dug into it and figured it out. And so now I can turn it on and stream to 1 or 2 other people relatively easily. We're working on expanding that. I expect that now that the headset's out, and I think part of it was in June, they didn't want to talk more about the headset because it wasn't available yet. As Jason alluded to, they didn't want to talk about the phone because the phone wasn't available yet either. And so I think that what you're looking at is now all the pieces are there. So you got a phone that can shoot in 3D. You've got a headset that can shoot in 3D. People have it. So I don't have to show you anything that hasn't been released yet. And so I think that now we're going to see, like, here's how you put all these things together, or the next layer of that at least. And so I think that we are going to cover on June 10th, we are going to have a special on our show to cover WWDC, because I think there's going to be an enormous number of things that are, and it won't be inside of office hours, but we will do a broadcast of it because the last one was really successful. so we were like, oh, we should do that more often. So we expect to cover that, and I think that it's going to be I think we're going to see a lot that impacts us. I think if you look at the iPad announcement and you look at the iPhone and where the iPhone's going, and you look at the headset, it's never been better to be a creator, because Apple is now focusing on, we're the ones that are buying the iPad Pros. We're the ones that are, getting, these headsets. We're the one, and there's a lot of focus on, video creation and all kinds of other creation. And so I think it's a good time for us. I think for a while, Apple was focused on business and education and everything else. And they're kind of almost in some ways coming back to their roots, realizing that we're the ones that buy the things that use up all of their hardware and software and tech. So I think it's going to be a good June 10th.
Next question.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia asks, how do you select the correct OpenAI for the Mac? I apologize if there is something that I'm overlooking, but it seems a little confusing as to which app on the Mac is the correct one.
Nigel Dessau is going to start us off.
So I don't know whether I know which is the correct one, because it depends how you want to use it, but I'm going to show you, unless I break some law. This is the ChatGPT app that they've released for the Mac. And so it's very easy to use. In the bottom bar here, you put your question. You can load photos into it. You can talk to it, and it's really very easy to use. There are lots of other. If you go up here, you can select the model. I pay the $20 a month to play this. You can select other GPTs. I think we've shown this before. You can do silly things like, can you turn me into a cartoon? Not very impressed by the goggle eyes of that. You can take pictures. I was out, we were trying to argue, my wife and I, was that a Model Y, a model, whatever it is in front. So I took a picture of it, and it told me. And so the camera works pretty well. And I thought this was funny. I took a picture when I was testing, I took a picture of the tablet that sits on top of my desk. And you can see the rather unpleasant tissue that it caught. And then it says, additionally, there is a crumpled tissue placed in front of the tablet. So it's pretty accurate. So I think there are lots of different models to use. But I would tell you that if you're like me early in the journey, the ChatGPT, I paid the $20 for the 4.0, is a really easy way in. And you've got to play with it. You've got to ask it questions. You've got to try some of the other models. You've really got to stretch yourself, because it's mind-bending what you can do. And the other GPT models really give you some of those ideas. And then when you've got an idea, maybe we can find a GPT that works better for us, that's more tailored to us. But I found that a really good way in.
Jason Bache.
My understanding, and I had to double check it, is that OpenAI doesn't actually have an official Mac OS app. And it looks like they're coming. Available later this year for Mac OS. Personally, I just use the web browser, and it works just fine.
There you go. Next question.
Jonathan Mielschon in Buenos Aires, Argentina asks, can the panel recommend an SRT streaming iPhone app that can be paid server-wise? Larix out of the question, currently on Haivision Play Pro, but it won't use the external Rode mic and doesn't feature local recording.
Guy Cochran, start us off here.
Yeah, I'm curious as to why not the Larix app. I know it costs money, and it's kind of the standard, though, for the iPhone. The other one that I like to use is called Stream to Studio, but I use it with an app that is called SRT Mini Server. And so with SRT Mini Server, I'm able to do things like sync up an SRT stream, because there's a timing that you can use it with a timing server. So I'll put a link to the chat.
Great. Alex Lindsay.
I would reach out, go to Stream Voodoo and reach out to them. I don't think they haven't released anything yet, but I would reach out to them.
Ooh,
Talk to them about
that sounds interesting. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Roz Humphreys in Comox, BC. Any ideas as to AI or other solutions to clean music with lots of wind and traffic noise? Thanks,
Alexander Knight.
Yeah, I would look at, there's a few solutions out there. Of course, the RX suite from iZotope is very good. There's different versions of that suite. There's the standard and the advanced one, which is a lot more money. You may want to try some of the demos and look at some of the tools that are in there. They're broken up into different modules that accomplish different things. Also, Waves. I've been experimenting with the Clarity plugins. They've got a few different versions of that. There's the Clarity VX, which is the basic one. Clarity VX Pro, which actually I have here. These ones are specifically for separating dialogue from background noise as well. And they also have a Deverb plugin. They may not work well on music. In my test just purely with dialogue, it works incredibly well, but if there's any kind of music, it makes the music sound really weird, so that may not be the perfect solution. You can get demos for these plugins. The demos will insert silence into the audio, but at least it'll give you a sense of whether or not it's going to work for you, so I would experiment with some of those.
Jason Beish.
Hands down, iZotope RX for me.
And Alex Lindsay.
I would just try something like the new Logic does it, but there's a bunch of these other apps that will separate out instruments using AI, and I would look at those because I wonder whether it might consider the voice as one thing and all of the stuff around it as something else, like another instrument, because it has kind of like it does the voice and the guitar and the drums, and it does it really well. And then it says, oh, and then there's other. And it's just like all the other sounds that I don't know. I don't know if that will work, but I'd be curious to see what it would do to the audio, whether it would isolate that voice more effectively.
John Wallace.
I would be really concerned around the fidelity. Broadband sounds like traffic noise, the car traffic, any of this wind noise can have a lot of frequency range that would be impacted. So even with the AI solution, I'd just be really concerned that a lot of the fundamental frequencies of these instruments and different sounds would end up getting eaten away, and what we would be left with would be less than ideal.
I'm going to be with John on this. Having done a lot of voice work in my life and having run into a lot of circumstances where either I or somebody did a recording where there was the mixture of my voice or somebody else's voice with that kind of broadband noise, if you try to remove the problem, you end up eating into the signal that you want. If there's a difference between the offending sounds and the one you want to keep, it's usually pretty easy. And these tools can be miraculous with them. But I'm still finding that if you're eating away frequencies that are part of the content you want to keep by trying to remove them from the background, and John had a perfect example of this, trying to find one voice in a crowded cocktail lounge kind of recording, that can be very difficult. So all I'm suggesting is pay attention to your recording circumstances and try to get those mics as close as possible to isolate the signal that you want from the noise that you don't want. And these tools are great, but don't rely on them because they will fail you when you need them most and you'll have to reshoot. Let's move on to the next question.
Next question comes from Håkan Fors in Stockholm, Sweden. Not added an NDI discovery server to my setup yet. What are the risks of adding one or two NDI discovery servers to a setup?
Alex Lindsay. I don't know if I'd do two, but I think that the risk of adding one discovery server is that the NDI might work better. I think that's the main risk of having it actually. But I would probably, I would recommend looking into it if you're having trouble with those issues.
Well, there's your reward for the risk.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Alexander, you had some good things to say about Rupert Neve. Have you ever had any experience with the Phoenix DIs?
Alexander, specifically
I have not, but I looked at the specs and my wallet's already on fire. It looks really good specs. I'm sure it's very good, but I don't know. It's brand new to me, so I will have to look into it.
Thanks, Douglas. Let's move on to the next question.
Next question is from me. If you had an unlimited budget, what camera would you buy and why?
That's the most dangerous phrase ever uttered on office hours. Nigel, start us out. We have an unlimited budget to work with.
And as it happens, I don't think I need an unlimited budget because I don't know I have the skills to operate, one of those unlimited budget cameras. So I have to tell you that I faced this problem last year. And I thought, well, the Sony A1, if I'm doing still photography, would be great. And the FX6 or, the 3 would be great if I was doing video, but I'm only buying one. So I went for the A7 IV. And I'm sure that's not got all the bells and whistles that everybody needs. But there's no point me buying a Red. I couldn't afford the lenses. There's no point me buying something like that. I couldn't operate. I just don't have the skills and I wouldn't use it. And at the end of the day, I'd rather spend the money on the glass than a camera I can use. Alex?
I'd probably do some tests between the Sony Venice 2 and the Arri LF, or the two and possibly the Arri Super 35. They're really nice cameras. Those would be kind of in the range of things that I would think of traditionally. But given that you gave me an unlimited budget, what I would probably it's unlimited. See, you didn't say under 100,000 or under 200,000. You didn't say anything, like that. So given an unlimited budget, I would probably go steal the designer of the Sphere camera and have him build me one. So I would have him build me a Sphere camera. I would make sure that its minimum spec was 18K. And I would take that and then put regular, but I'd have him actually build it so that it was built, the chassis was built with two Sphere camera sensors that had independent control over convergence and interaxial distance. And so they were all built together as a stereo camera so that I was able to capture. And then I'd want to make sure that camera was, of course, able to capture, 18 stops, of course, that'd be the minimum for this camera that I have unlimited budget to design. It would be able to capture that 18K at 120 frames per second because, and it would probably, require a little bit of horsepower to do that. There might be a small truck that ran it, but that's all part of the camera system. And so at an unlimited budget, that's where I'd go. I don't think it would cost. I personally don't think it would cost over $100 million to build that camera in research and development and process. But you gave me an unlimited budget, so that's what I would do. And that now I could use only one eye and be able to shoot IMAX level quality. But if I do two eyes, I'd be able to future-proof for at least a decade or two, a dual eye system that actually has, again, convergence and interaxial, so you can kind of move them back and forth. That's where I would go.
Oh, come on. If you got an unlimited budget, you're going to start with two Sphere sensors, and now you're going to have 10 the next week because you're going to decide, I want to be able to tile.
Call it the magic, the magic fly eye.
The reality engine camera. Yeah, Alexander Knight.
I just had to ask this ludicrous question. Of course, I get a ludicrous answer, which is great.
It's not that ludicrous. Not that ludicrous. There might be people working on that.
Fast approaching IMAX level there. For me, and
we're going beyond IMAX.
FR7 for me. I just think the motorized, a full frame sensor that's motorized with the controls and stuff like that, for me would be a game changer because I would never have to get out of my seat to readjust to someone's camera again because I don't have a camera operator.
It's a
solo operation.
We just used it on Tuesday for an event. We used 3 or 4 of them on Tuesday, and it's just such a great camera to work with. And as a PTZ, again, doesn't do some of the things that you're putting in the back of the room. I just don't do shows where you put the cameras in the back of the room. so I don't care about the long lenses or anything else. I just want to be, I put the camera, and the cool thing is the cameras were sitting in front of, 800 people, but we just put them where they need to be. But because we don't have camera operators and everything else, they can sit there and the seat kill is not that heinous because it's such a small little head. And the images it generates are just amazing, and so it's really, really, really a great camera.
All I can think of is that if you're shooting on the Sphere sensor, how much can you push in to fill a 3840 by 2160 frame?
So much. So much. The hardest part you get into, so the funny thing is the hardest part you get into with those large, really large sensors is the glass, because the glass can't the glass actually can't resolve to 18K. So there's like 20 lenses that you can use out there. Yeah. So then we haven't talked about it because I would consider it. I would make it a package deal for the lenses, and because you would have to grind your own lenses to
buy Zeiss.
Yeah,
you have an unlimited.
I have an unlimited budget. We'll just buy Zeiss and bend them to our will. Oh, we will have the.
We're stopping all development except for this lens.
Yeah, we buy Zeiss and just lasers. Go, all those other things that you were doing, forget it. We're building this one lens because I have an unlimited budget. They're like, well, how are you going to pay for this? I was like, I have an unlimited budget.
I've got a card color that you've never seen. It's bottomless. Let's go on to the next question. This has been fun.
It's called pulling an apple. Next question is from Håkan Fors in Stockholm, Sweden. Thinking outside the box, what revolutionary workflows do you think 2110/NDI can enable?
Jason Bache, start us off there.
Well, in a perfect world, it would eliminate the need for kind of complex and redundant routing to go two ways like you have with SDI. That's a pretty big thing.
Absolutely. Let's go on to the next question.
Clive Ledford in Kingston, Jamaica asks, Jason, how would a managed switch help a house of worship with everyone on the same router from which streaming is done? Will it help to allocate bandwidth as well? Recommendations for at least 8 ports.
I know Jason was name checked, but John Wallace had his hand up first, so we're going to go Jason. We're going to go John and then Jason. John?
Yeah, so I don't know that a managed switch is going to help you as much here as making sure that you have a layer 3 device that is able to do QoS. So quality of service is what's going to allow you to allocate more bandwidth to your streaming or set aside bandwidth specifically. So only this device can use this much and everybody else is stuck with a smaller pool of bandwidth to be able to function. Make sure you don't skimp out. If you are just going with the managed switch, then everything's going to have to go through a router. Make sure you understand your backplane, all the usage across all the devices. Anything that's crossing in that has to step up to that router and come back down is going to be a point of contention. And so just making sure you understand that. As far as recommendations go, those Netgear devices that are specifically made for audio and video, they have a lot of great feature sets. They're layer 3 and they can solve your need.
And Jason.
That answer was perfect. I don't have anything to add to that.
Excellent. All right, Clive, hopefully that helped you. Let's move on to the next question.
Jason Robert Shaw in Sarasota, Florida asks, OSBOT versus Insta360 Link, but you are using it with Zoom on iPadOS. Will the PTZ still work? Which do you choose? Alternatives? iPad now supports external webcams.
Alex Lindsay, start us off.
So I might say the OSBOT in this case, and here's why. The interface for the OSBOT on the Mac and the PC, I don't know what the PC, but on the Mac, it's kind of worthless. So that the problem is if you're not going to do custom development for the OSBOT is not a great camera. I have one. I bought one. I'm a little bitter about it. And so it doesn't, the controls aren't very good. It's just buggy. And so if you're using it on the Mac, I think that the Insta360 Link is way better because its interface is way better, but it doesn't have any, any kind of development, any kind of SDK. So on the iPadOS out of the box, I don't know which one would be better. I don't even know if you could run either one of those or move them around, and maybe Guy will know more about that. But I think that OSBOT has more. The ceiling is higher on OSBOT because you could potentially develop something, or someone can develop something in the iPad to be able to control it remotely. But and I think Insta360 may not be. I don't know if it'll work that way. So, and I haven't tested either one of them with an iPad. I do know it can see the webcams. I just haven't gone down that path.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, I've tested it with the iPadOS, and it does work with the Insta360 Link to get an image into Zoom, but you're stuck at full wide. So,
and you can't pan tilt zoom it, right? There's nothing. It's just a web camera.
You have no control. So with the OSBOT, you have the ability to purchase an external remote control, and with that, you can now zoom that one in. So if you're looking at the two, just remember it's only 720p. There is no 1080 on the iPadOS for Zoom at this point.
There you go. Next question.
Clive Ludford in Kingston, Jamaica asks, Alex, please give tips on how to balance the following soft skills for a successful event. Positive client-facing approach, client expectation, communicating cost versus value, surprise, and delight.
Ooh, I'll take all of the above, please. Nigel, help us sort this out.
I was hoping I was going to go second because the question was really for Alex. So I had a codicil to add, so I bow to Alex and will come back with my codicil.
Okay, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the interesting thing is that it's actually, a lot of people can do the job. The question is how do you get the job done in a way that the client enjoys the experience? And so you're trying to, manage that. So a lot of it ahead of time. I mean, one thing that I'm kind of careful about is that there's this, when you say positive client-facing experience, one of the things that I'm actually not known for is telling my clients that everything is going great. I am when you're at an event with me, I'm like, everything's going okay so far. Everything is nominal. Like everything is, we're doing, everything looks okay at the moment, but I'll very rarely say things are going great. And oftentimes in production when you're loading in, things don't feel like they're going great anyway. So it's not like I'm not saying what's there. It's just that you're putting it all together and it's not there yet. But I am also careful of telling them what I'm concerned about and what I'm looking at. Not like it's a problem, but like, hey, we're worried about this, and this, and this is what we're working through. And kind of explaining those things in a calm, like we have it under control, but these are the things that we're looking at. I also will red flag things pretty quickly when things are outside of that are affecting me. So if something's running behind schedule, that somebody else is running behind schedule, I will let you know immediately that they're behind schedule. Because I can't tell you later if the show didn't work. I can't come back to you and say, well, it was because we didn't have enough time. Well, they'll be like, well, why didn't you say that when it happened? And so I say it when it happens. So I don't say it in a angry way. I don't force it to change, but you'll start getting emails and texts from me almost immediately if something's affecting me of like, hey, we need to move this forward because I'm laying pins, while I'm talking of like, hey, this is a problem and it is going to affect my production because as a production person, oftentimes you don't get blamed. You get blamed for those things, even though it was somebody else that put you in that position. A lot of it again is one of the things that when you talk about surprise and delight and communicating cost and value is really showing that to them. So a lot of times I look for opportunities where if I see something that I know I can make better, but I only need a little bit of a change from the client. I don't want the client to make my job easier. The client learning how to make my job easier means that I'm easier to replace. Like what I'm looking for is little things that I can do that don't cost me very much effort, resources, time, that will add a lot of value to the project that I know how to do. And so I'll sit there and figure little things out. And so we'll do lots and lots of little things. Like I do countdown clocks. A lot of people do countdown clocks, except I integrate the countdown clock into the actual feel of the poster frame. Like I take the poster assets and I build a countdown clock that feels like it, that's there. And sometimes that means managing, 15,000 by 18,000 pixel images and putting those all together and making it all work. And so the thing is that I do that very carefully and I push hard because I know that almost nobody in the business can do that. Like they'll have some cheap countdown clock or they'll have something they can just, some turnkey or whatever, and I can make it look like it feels like it's part of the poster. And because I've done 1,000 of them, and so I think that is the distinction is that's a value add that I can add to it. There's little things that we do, like we use FR7s. Almost nobody in our business uses FR7s. Clients don't know what the difference is, except for the fact that our shows look way better than theirs, and so little things like that, bigger lights, and we push for things. And sometimes you have to push harder for things that other people don't do. We do things like I bring in when I do we do a lot of Q&As. I have stand-ins for all those Q&As that I tune all the cameras and make everything work. Most people don't do that. So we kind of file all that stuff in to make sure that everything is really, dialed in a way. And what happens is when the client chooses somebody else, because, they will inevitably go, oh, well, I want to try something cheaper or somebody else requires this company. We want to make sure that the fall off between us and them is like that. Then they come back and they're so much nicer. So you want to keep on adding that value, not by constantly upselling them to buy more, but figuring out if you work with a client over and over and over again, You figure out what's important to them, and you figure out where you can add subtle value that doesn't cost you a lot, but is a little something that makes it a little nicer, and a little bit more comfortable, and a little bit more, you do those things, and that customization is what every corporate client wants. Is that you're, it's kind of the Cheers, where everybody knows your name, and that we know what they want. We know what where you're constantly trying to triangulate everything that makes their job just a little nicer to work with you, as opposed to working with somebody else that doesn't know them, that really, even no matter how good they are, they're coming in blank, where you have all this information and you should be using that. And if you're not doing your job.
Nigel.
Yeah, just two little quick adds. I find a very useful question to ask myself is, am I looking inside out or outside in? You've got to put yourself in the customer's shoes and look at you. You've got to look outside in. If you look outside in, you'll see different things than when you look inside out. I can explain that if it doesn't make sense. But your surprise and delight led me to your nighttime reading and studying. So there's a book called Unreasonable Hospitality. It's a great listen. It's a great read. It's also a TED Talk, so I'll put the link to the TED Talk in the chat. But it was the owner of a restaurant called One Madison Park who took it to being the #1 restaurant in the world, from nowhere to the #1 restaurant. And they did it by being surprise and delight. They're very expensive. It's hard to get a booking there. But the way it's full of stories about the way that they thought about what they did from a customer view. Okay, there's loads of examples. One silly one is within the restaurant, there is a one-way system that all the waiters know. They don't bump into each other. They don't crash into each other. They don't get in each other's way because they thought about what that experience was for the diners. So it's a really worth a read, or at least watch the TED Talk for the hot dog story.
Alexander Knight.
I have one example, and actually this happened last night. And it's seemingly such a small, tiny thing. But we had Cody Ash, the drummer for Jelly Roll, come in, do a clinic in our store. And he showed up with his videographer and the person that represents Mapex, because he's a Mapex endorsee. And nobody offered him anything. Like, he had nothing to drink. Like, none of them actually had anything to drink. And I was really embarrassed by it. I went down the street, bought a bunch of bottles of water for everybody. He's super appreciative, but just like a small thing like that. And he actually gave me a hug at the end of the night. I don't know if that made any difference, but it's just like little things like that just to make people feel comfortable makes a big difference.
Alex, you're coming back.
Yeah, and I used to support people who were leading seminars, and you would get to a point where you were focused on them, and you could see that they were, you would look at the angle of their drink to know how much tea was left. like you'd be sitting there, and go, oh, he's almost out of tea, and so you'd be doing this, and that level of paying attention to your talent, and your guests. How does it feel when they go in? We would talk about, when we were, and it was the best training in the world. I was in my early 20s doing this and running these teams. And the best training in the world was this detail. Like we would put things under the chairs, and the pencils were exactly 1 inch from the chairs were exactly 2 inches apart. The pencils were exactly 1 inch from the side of one of the feet of the chair, and the paper was another one. It's perfect. Everything was perfect. It feels different when you walk into the room. When you walk into the room and things aren't just thrown under the chairs or thrown in the chairs. When we use little strings. I mean, a lot of people do that. In Germany, they have these great wooden, like I'd never seen that before. They have these wooden measuring things that measure the chairs so that the chairs are perfect. And I had never seen that before. And I was like, okay, that's the coolest thing, And so, but when you create these like when we do spirals, we have a piece of we use a string and we pull it out, and it's got like markers on it on how far the chairs have to be. We can swing that all the way around so that we get these perfect spirals. And when you look at how that feels when you walk in, it feels different. It just feels like it feels like this event matters. And so you want to be constantly, and what you always know when people have gotten past doing production, like when they've gotten to another level, is when all they talk about is how people feel. How does the guest feel when they walk in? How does the talent feel when they walk on stage? How does the crew feel when they're working? And you want to think, but they're not talking about how to get it done or the coolest images or whatever. They're talking about how everybody feels, and they're constantly looking at how people feel, because the feel is the most important part of an event, is how you felt, and because it's a subconscious thing that lives in not in your conscious mind, and you want to be working there. Like that's when you do events, you're working in the feel of the event because the issue is that people don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And that's way more powerful than them knowing what they're doing. So so constantly thinking about all of those things. And you can see when we work with great producers, they'll walk in and they'll say, well, that sign's just a little off and this is a little, and what they're doing is they're tightening it all up so it feels important.
Let's go to the next question.
Next question is from John Preto in Las Vegas. In a production, whose decision might it be for the film to cross the line for dramatic effect?
Alex is going to answer this, but let me just quickly, for those of you who might not know, crossing the line is a simple...
I'll explain. I can explain.
You want to do it? Okay,
yeah.
great.
So if you've got a line of direction, so oftentimes you'll have two people talking to each other, and this would be typically the line of direction. And what's going to happen is that you're going to have cameras, on either side. They're not going to cross over this line. So you're not going to have a camera over here capturing them because the idea is that there's two reasons that you do it. And this is the first lesson I had at Lucasfilm, because when I got to Lucasfilm, I didn't actually know this. I was a modeler, 3D modeler, and when I started laying something out, he's like, "You're crossing the line." I was like, "I'm crossing the what?" And he's like, "And this is literally the diagram that David Dezoritz wrote for me." So so you have, if you cut over here, there's two problems. One is if you're cutting back and forth between something on this side and this side, and you keep on going back and forth over that line, people will get confused about who's where and what's going on. The other thing is that you've got a bunch of set over here, and you've got a bunch of crew over here and a bunch of set over there. The line protects the set so that you don't have to build both sides, at least for that scene. So it does two different things. But the main thing is clarity, and especially in film, over 100 years, we've stayed on one side of the line. Typically, when you cross the line, you do it in the shot. So if I'm going to cross this line here, I'm going to use a mechanical. I'm going to take this and I'm going to dolly it to one side. So I'm going to tell you there's a place where I'm communicating to the viewer that I'm crossing the line by moving it during the shot. Now I'm on the other side, but now everything's on that side, and it'll stay on that. A great one to watch for that is the Matrix. I keep on meaning to break this down for people, and I just haven't had a time. I used to do it for a class. The Kung Fu scene. They're going to cross the line a couple times, and they're going to do it perfectly, where they do it in the shot. They're going to cut back and forth. They're going to do all those bits and pieces. And so, but that's why you do it. The director decides to do that. Usually the director is the one that makes that decision, to get back to your answer. But that's what crossing the line is. But usually you do it in the shot. It's very rare to do it outside of the shot.
I just had a simpler thing for me. I ran into it a lot when my camera was in the audience shooting at the person on stage. If they are moving left to right for that camera, and I put a camera upstage, they are suddenly moving right to left. And the cut between those two disorients the audience because everything directionally changes. But yeah, same basic idea. And let's go on to the next question.
Next question's from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. With the upcoming firmware release for the Netgear AV line, version 13.0422, releasing on the 27th with much more support for audio and video, does it officially become the de facto switch for production?
Guy Cochran.
I don't know about the de facto, but they're definitely making inroads purposefully. They have what's called network design services. So to me, it's not just the fact that they have engineers that are working with these manufacturers directly. It's that they're willing to help you, and so they're at the bleeding edge and seeing how this stuff's being installed. So this new update, it has a bunch of templates, so you can see that there's Bird Dog, Kramer. There's some new stuff on NDI 6, QSYS. So in my eyes, that's them making it a point and showing the folks that would attend an NAB, hey, we're serious. But the next thing's 2110, and they've got these big, massive 50 gigabit and 100 gigabit switches. But in this kind of small company to medium-sized production, I'm seeing them everywhere. I mean, especially for Dante, people are loving them. So in NDI, of course, because the profiles make it so simple. Because they have something called IGMP Snooping Plus, which is it's just super helpful in being able to discover all these sources and keep track of them, and it just makes things easier where other switches may fall down, and then they have a beefy enough backplane to handle what they say. So that's one of the most important things in this industry is for switches and with NDI is having it do at full load what you think it's going to do and not have it fall down in the middle of a show.
Nigel.
I would just be grateful if Guy or Mike, you install it, you let me know it works, because I'm not brave enough to do that until someone has told me. I love my Netgear AV line. I put two in. I've not touched my network since I did that. It's really been rock solid. But I am more than a little scared about changing that software. So please, when you've made it work, let me know.
Perfect. Let's go to the next question.
Håkan Fors in Stockholm, Sweden asks, looking for a remote shading solution for Sony PXW-Z90 in my OB van. Any suggestions?
I think that's OB van for outside broadcast. But John Wallace, take us through it.
I'd be looking at the LUT boxes from Blackmagic or AJA. Just be aware that you're probably only dealing with 8-bit signals, so you can't stretch it too far. So try to get it as close as you can in the camera, and you can make some slight adjustments afterwards.
Alex Lindsay.
Yeah, and if you're looking for if you're trying to do a remote operation, if you're talking about Zoom and start and record and everything else, they have a mini jack, a 2.5 millimeter, stereo mini to mini jack that's there. I don't know. They don't list it as LANC, so I don't know if it's LANC, because LANC would typically be that. And you can sometimes find an IP controller to a LANC. So basically that headset jack is electrical impulses, like it's just on, off, lots of little on and offs to tell it what to do. And so there are people who have done that. I haven't done it with this camera. I know we've done it with LANCs before, where we literally have a LANC controller. I don't remember what board we were using, but it was tied into that. I didn't do it. I just know that we had it. So it was delivering LANC information to the camera from an IP controller, so that we were able to sit there and change its focus and do all the other things that we wanted to do. That's what if you're looking for remote operation, not remote shading, I do agree with John to have some kind of, you can do a variety of things with LUTs. You can even, but if you want to control things like focus and zoom and those types of things, you're going to want to focus in on how to send electrical impulses to that 2.5 millimeter jack.
Next question.
Alex 4D Gullner in London asks, do you think if Apple had locked down the production workflow for Apple Vision Pro for immersive experiences, more experiences would have been released by Apple and others by now? Useful to promote AVP as a content consumption device.
Jason, what do you think?
Boy, that's a double stipulation. So, yes, I would think that there would be more out there, but also, no, I can completely and totally see Apple being so tight-lipped that, to get a higher level production, the way that they wanted it may not have been even able to begin until very soon beforehand. So,
Alex Lindsay. Oh, I'm sorry. Thought you were John. Jason, you finished up? Yeah. Alex Lindsay.
We bought into a test cycle. Like I don't think Apple's in any rush. I mean, I think that I know a lot of press people think that this is the end and it wasn't as successful as they thought it was. And we're in year 10 of a 20-year program. Like, this is like Apple. This is not like Apple's not like, let's throw this against the wall and see if it works. I mean, they've spent 10 years working on this, and they're going to spend another 10 years working on it. And we're in the middle, and it's only been out for a couple months. If they have all the little edit that they showed with MLS, they probably have all that footage somewhere. And I think that rolling it out slowly makes more sense for them. They talked about it last year. They gave us a little bit of input. They got us enough to get excited. Now they're putting other pieces out, and people like me. The advantage for people like me and people like Stream Voodoo and people like other things is that you allow us to get ahead of everybody else, because right now it's hard. So we usually don't. If you're really trying to stay on that bleeding edge, it's great when things aren't documented very well, because it means that that's a hard place to go, and it gives us it allows us to kind of grow into that and figure that out. And companies don't ignore that, of letting the early runners have a little bit of time to work on it. And I think that they're not finalizing the spec, because now they have a whole bunch of people in the wild. It's much easier to test and talk about and everything else when everyone has the headset. Before they had that, I mean, the restrictions on the headset before they released it was almost 100%. When they released it to partners, it was still like, you have to It can only be full-time employees, and it has to be in a room, and you have to use, and we have to have a list of the people that can go into that room, and that room has to be locked. And there's all these rules that were applied to everyone, and so it was very hard to develop anything. So the opportunity to develop to a wider market has only existed for 2 or 3 months. And I think that, and I think that also, I think Apple has an advantage that they know how to build that content better than anyone else, and I think that they probably will want to hold on to that advantage for a little while longer because it makes it hard to develop for both Meta and Apple Vision Pro. So I think those are some of the things that are going on there. But I think it's an exciting time, and I think immersive is going to be a huge future. When you watch immersive stuff that works, especially dual 180 at high resolution, high frame rate, it's hard to go back. To experience something. And we're only seeing little bits of it, and Apple's only showing us little bits, but I think you're just going to see them dribble it out. There's no reason for them to push everything out and everybody watch everything and then not have anything else to watch. And so I think you're going to see them slowly roll this stuff out over the next year.
And to support that, I will say that my just personal journey from consuming most visual content in a room that could have other people in it to what I do now, which is typically watch content on my phone or on an iPad as a personal experience, this leads right into that because Vision Pro and the rest of that is a very personal experience, less than a shared experience. And I think a lot of people are going to go that way because it's really satisfying to watch what you want when you want and not bother anybody else with that. So for what that's worth. Next question.
Next question is from Russell K. in Brooklyn, Maine. Photographer, new to audio, recording interviews for a doc, mix pre, lav mic and boom. Am I wrong to not record the stereo mix? I end up having to unlink the audio and delete the stereo mix and then relink. Thanks for your thoughts, and that's from the QR code.
We're going to start with Jason Basht for this one. Jason?
Assuming you mean the stereo mix in the mix pre, if all your sources are mono, no, I can't think of a particularly great reason to record your stereo mix also. You might be handy to record it in the camera just for a quick sync up, but of course with the mix pre, you can also do that with HDMI. So no, I can't think of any reason.
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, it should be channel 1 and channel 2. So you've got your lav on one channel and you've got your boom on another channel. And then when you go into post, depending on the app, instead of letting it be stereo, you can choose to make it mono, and then you can just delete the track that you're not using or take the levels down. But yeah, it's common practice to have both and then being able to isolate and take one down without the other being affected or having one panned hard left and hard right in your ears. But yeah, it should be mono.
I think we have time for one more question before the top of the hour.
Sounds like Mork and Mindy. Nano.
Next question is from Håkan Force in Stockholm, Sweden. How will a live production be affected if the NDI discovery server goes down after sources are connected to the destination? Will the sources repopulate the discovery server on a regular basis?
Guy Cochran.
Yeah, so the discovery server is just a list of devices. If you were to look at what it's doing, it's just writing a file that basically says, here's your listeners, your sources and your listeners. And so if it goes out, basically you won't be able to reacquire them. But once they're acquired, because it's just an IP address and a port number, and so once it knows what that is and it's playing, it's fine. But if it does go out, this is where redundancy comes into play, and having two is really handy. And it'll run on a little, weak device. You don't have to have a super powerful device. So having two in Access Manager, you just put a comma. So it'd be like 192.168.1.189, comma, and then do another one with .190 or something like that. That's what mine are. So that's
nice.
The way I'd.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of the first hour, so I got a couple of announcements before we move into our second hour. In just a minute, we're going to be going over there. And in our second hour today, we're looking at our NAB coverage from the perspective of using VPNs, virtual private networks. They're the device or the concept that's helping us coordinate our global show crew for contributions and things like that. Most people, I think, who listen to this show probably already understand the basics, but we'll be talking through how we use them here at Office Hours to help particularly the globally connected live shows that we do. Tomorrow, Saturday, it's a full day of Q&A from our show start, and as long as we have questions to answer, that's how long we'll go. It's also a day where we shake out new technology for the show a bit, and so we might be experimenting here or there. Saturday's becoming, I think, more and more interesting to watch. Sunday, as always, is a bit more philosophical. If you have questions about how the show runs, how we do the things we do, what the kind of the philosophical foundations for what we're putting together here on Office Hours, Sunday is the perfect day to talk about that. It is not broadcast on YouTube, and that means we have a little better chance to just speculate, imagine, dream, and think about what might be coming up for the good of the show in the future. And don't forget, After Hours is in operation 24/7. For those of you who might be new to the show, we know we have new people coming in all the time. After Hours runs every hour that the show is not officially on and broadcasting, and it's kind of a community where you can join, talk to some of the people who are interested in the show, share ideas. A lot of problem solving goes on in After Hours. I can't tell you the number of times I've had a question or something I needed to do that it was maybe a little bit beyond my technical expertise, and hopping into Office Hours and posing the question, suddenly I have a group of people who can help me understand and fix this. I've solved a lot of problems that way, and I've met a lot of incredibly nice people. I just love hanging out in Office Hours because there's so many people of like minds there. We'll be right back with our next topic. Welcome back to our second hour.